you and your colleagues worked for weeks at a time for 80 hours or more to design and write a competitive 40-page proposal that outlined a statewide project that would benefit thousands, including small businesses. Then learned the organization received what you worked so hard for, a $156 million grant. But something happens that rips it all away. That's what we're going to talk about today on this episode of Federal Grants Explained. Welcome back to another episode of Federal Grants Explained, a new video series and podcast I created to explain what's happening in the world of federal grants under the current administration. If this is your first time here, my name is Patrice Davis. I'm a former federal employee and I'm the founder of GrantsWorks Consulting and GrantsWorks Academy. We specialize in federal grants. My team and I have obtained and managed approximately $300 million in federal grants from over 20 federal and other government agencies for over 18 years. And I've developed and delivered training for clients, collaborators, and for federal agency. On this channel, my goal is to shed light on what's happening with federal grant funding under the current administration. So I'm covering funding freezes, grant cancellations, agency changes and shutdowns, how the federal workforce reduction will impact how grants are announced, awarded, and monitored by federal officials, and yes, even new and relevant federal policy as announced through executive orders and cabinet level memos. When possible, I'll also feature guests such as former federal employees, other consultants, and in this case, federal grantees. We have a federal grantee who will be joining us here today. If this is a topic you find interesting and valuable, please subscribe so you know when the next video is published. In addition to subscribing, please hit the notification bell and share this video with others within your organization or your professional association who you think will find this information helpful. I create these videos without the help of AI, so I appreciate that you appreciate them and find them valuable. I now ask you to do three things instead of two, actually. One, subscribe. Two, turn on notifications by clicking that notification bell. And if you have a comment, please drop a comment below. That will be number three. Thanks again for joining us on this episode of Federal Grants Explained. I'm excited to have with me two people from the Capital Good Fund. I'll start by briefly describing the Capital Good Fund, and then I'll ask each of our guests to state their names and provide us with a brief overview of their title and their roles at Capital Good Fund. So the Capital Good Fund is a social change organization that uses financial services to tackle poverty and climate change in America. So they have an amazing mission and things that they're trying to accomplish. The organization is a nonprofit certified community development financial institution that believes in equitable, and I always have a time with that word, equitable financing for all. It currently offers financing in 11 states. And those states are, for those of you maybe listening from one of these states, you can certainly look to find out what opportunities may exist for you. Those 11 states are Rhode Island, Florida, Massachusetts, Illinois, Delaware, Texas, Colorado, New Jersey, Connecticut, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. The Capital Good Fund received a $156,010,000 Solar for All grant from the Environmental Protection Agency. And it's what happened next that made me invite them to tell their story. But before we dive into what happened, I'll turn it over to Aisha for her to give us her name and role at the Capital Good Fund, and then I'll turn it over for Alicia to do the same. So Aisha, if you can tell us a little bit about what you do at the Capital Good Fund.
Absolutely. Thanks, Patrice. So my name is Aisha Bussey. I am the Chief Business Officer for Capital Good Fund, which is really a fancy way of saying jack of all trades for the organization. So kind of under my world falls marketing, communications, our IT department. We also offer financial coaching, special projects, operations. I'm missing something, but I can't, business development. So a little bit of everything at the organization. I've been with Capital Good Fund for about 6.5 years now.
Mhm.
Before Capital Good Fund, my background is fully corporate marketing and communication. So this organization was my first kind of adventure into nonprofit. So we have a really great organization with a spectacular team. We do a lot of work with a small team. So I'm really proud of what we've accomplished since 2009, and especially since I've been with the organization.
Awesome, awesome. And Alicia, if you can do the same, that'll be fantastic.
Sure. I'm Alicia Brown. I'm the director of Georgia Bright at Capital Good Fund. I joined in July of 2024 after the Solar for All program had been awarded to lead the implementation of that program. I had been involved with Good Fund as a community partner for far longer than that. Actually, Aisha will tell you the Georgia Bright pilot program that kind of started this whole adventure was a joint venture dreamed up between our CEO and myself beginning in November of 2022. But yeah, so since Solar for All, and probably going to jump ahead of you, but since Solar for All has changed in our life, my role has evolved to also be kind of a jack of all trades, charting our path forward.
So let's start with why I invited you, wonderful people, to join me on the podcast. And the reason is that Capital Good Fund is one of the organizations, and according to the NOFO, which is called a Notice of Funding Opportunity, there were going to be up to 60 awardees. I'm not sure what that final number was, but the Capital Good Fund was one of those awardees that received a pretty sizable Solar for All grant from the EPA. Again, that was a $156 million grant. And that the grant was canceled by the current administration. So there is no lead up, guys. We're going to go right into what happened, but I really want them to tell their specific story. I think for those of you who've been listening to the podcast, I've been talking about grant cancellations by agency, and the Solar for All was one of the ones that I'd shared before. But if you can please tell me where you both were when you learned that the grant was canceled, and what did that look like inside the Capital Good Fund? What was there panic? What were some of the feelings that you all experienced individually and within the organization? I'll start with you, Aisha.
It feels like it was a year ago and yesterday all at the same time. So the week that we received the notice of termination, Alicia, myself, our CEO flew down to Georgia. We had representation from the cities of Atlanta, Savannah, and Decatur, along with, I think, Alicia, about 50 or 60 representatives across the state. And we actually officially launched the program on August 4th. It was a very successful event. Within, I think, 48 hours, we received over 800 applicants for our no-cost solar program, which was really focused on providing free solar to low income homeowners across the state of Georgia. So they would enter a lottery, we would choose at random, and those homeowners would receive free solar as part of the grant requirements. So for us, this was probably, I've said this in my career of all the things that I've done, marketing and advertising, this was probably one of the most, if not the most successful marketing launches, communications launches, project launches that I've experienced in my 20 plus years, working. And so I think I can safely say for Alicia, as well as our CEO, we were riding a high for a couple of days. And it really felt like the hard work that we have put into this was really starting to come to fruition. And it was great. And the first kind of rumblings that we heard was interestingly, through Twitter. There was a Twitter video saying that the program was going to be canceled. And so we just kind of sat back, and I believe the next day we received the notice of termination, and it was it was a punch to the gut for all of us. I mean, I can say across the entire organization, we really felt the pain of not only all of the hard work that we put into the program, but also the other 59 recipients of the program. And most importantly, all of the people across the country that were no longer going to have the opportunity to take advantage of this grant. People were planning on using this to really help lower their energy costs.
Mm-hmm.
And it really was an opportunity to have marginalized communities and people who have historically been left out of the climate conversation to really have a seat at the table and really take advantage of the opportunities that have been out there,
Mm-hmm.
but not for them. So, once we kind of got over our internal shock and the shock of the other recipients, we really started to think about what this meant to our homeowners.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, one of the hardest things that we did was we had to communicate to those homeowners that they no longer were in the drawing, and also communicate to our community partners and the small business owners that we were working with who had planned or who had, leveled up their staff, hired more people, started their own campaigns that were rooting for us and we were rooting for them. We had to also notify them that we could no longer provide the support for the program, that we could no longer be that vehicle that was really going to help them grow their small business. I mean, these are small Georgia businesses, women-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses. I mean, and I think that was heartbreaking for all of us. So it was a difficult time, and I know we're probably going to get into this, but thanks to Alicia and the rest of our staff, we are, working on. We're not stopping. We are we are determined to help Georgians as well as other states, other communities through this program. And
Awesome.
So we are determined to figure out a way to make this happen. We may not be able, obviously $156 million is a lot to lose. So, we're getting creative in how we can still serve the community.
Absolutely.
So that's one thing we've been able to take away from this is, all right, let's roll our sleeves and figure out plan B, C, D, and E.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So, Alicia, before you start, there are a couple of things I want to point out, and this is why I'm always talking about grant cancellations. It's not just the cancellation of the funds to that one organization. There are typically partners involved. So not only are we talking about the recipients of the different financing mechanisms to be able to finally get the funding to be able to install solar in whatever capacity you design the project. Potentially, there was probably a storage mechanism. I'm not sure what that entailed. There are businesses, so with every grant, I always try to explain that every grant, especially a federal grant, because they're so large and they typically multi-year grants, there's almost a concentric circle of communities around the original recipient of that grant. So I'll turn it over to you now, Alicia, to please tell me where you were when you learned, and anything else you can share about that experience.
Yeah, Aisha summed it up really well. We had this, 2-year culmination of all the work and the listening and the design and the problem solving to launch the program. And as I remember, it was either that very night or the very next night that I received an email from the rumor mill saying that we should be concerned.
Yeah.
And what's ironic about this is I had had an interview with a reporter that same day, and they had asked me if I was concerned, and I had reached a point where I wasn't. I was like, this is somehow we've escaped for 7 months since the administration changed. I think that this is bipartisan. I had had conversations with representatives, elected officials on both sides of the aisle, and the consensus that I had heard from them was that this program was safe. So I had come to internalize that. So when that email came through, that obviously my heart dropped because this has been anyone who worked with me, for me, would have told you this was my baby.
Absolutely.
So, my heart dropped with that, knowing everything we were set up to accomplish and how the program was already exerting positive influence in the state. And then, of course, when the video came out on X, at that point, I knew it was pretty much a done deal. And then, of course, the formal termination came. Aisha summed it up perfectly. Like this caused a lot of harms to the state of Georgia. I mean, certainly Good Fund took a body blow from it, but the small businesses we were working with, like one of our installers had bought warehouse space, upped his insurance policy, hired people. Some of our contractors had signed legal contracts and software contracts that you can't just get out of. So I feel really bad for the businesses that we harmed, but also the homeowners that we gave some hope. One of them when I was corresponding with them afterwards to let them know the program wasn't going to continue, they said that they had finally, had some hope that they were going to be able to hold on to the American dream because
Yeah.
they had bought a home and were having a hard time affording the monthly payments and were really concerned about losing it.
Hmm.
And they thought this could be the thing that could get us out from underwater on our home,
Hmm.
and telling them that it wasn't an option anymore. I mean, yeah, it's devastating.
Yeah, yeah. And there's so much more I'm gonna, I can share about that. There are a couple of things though. I do want to make sure that we provide for the audience a brief overview of the Solar for All funding opportunity. So Solar for All was a $7 billion program developed by the EPA to expand residential solar generation and storage to low income and disadvantaged households. As Aisha pointed out, these are typically the communities that are not necessarily involved or able to take advantage of residential solar programs because, of course, the cost that one would have to incur to, of course, get solar installed. So that's typically cost prohibitive. The funding opportunity itself was aligned with the Biden administration's equity and environmental justice priorities as outlined in Executive Orders 14091, 14008, and the Justice 40 Initiative. And the goal was to fund, as I mentioned, 60 projects. It turns out there were actually 60 recipients, as I believe Alicia confirmed for me, that were awarded to state government agencies, municipalities, tribal governments, territories, and eligible nonprofits. So the other brief amount of information I'd like to provide is that GrantsWorks, my consulting firm, our consulting firm was actually a grant writer for one of the recipients that received a large grant as well. It wasn't a $156 million grant. It was a 64 or $62.5 million grant. And, as they can, as they will share actually, just writing a federal grant, as I've shared with you all, is a 6 to 8 week process, sometimes 10 weeks. And when you're writing a grant for a really technical project that involves multiple partners, multiple letters of commitment, I know you guys remember those. It's a really large undertaking. So to do all of that, then learn that you're awarded, and then have a kickoff, a successful kickoff, as Aisha described it, and then a few days later to learn the grant is no more, and then that it's no more primarily for certain policy reasons. I'm sure it's been very disappointing for them. So let's start with some basic facts and how those facts impact the two of you. I want to take a broader look at the Capital Good Fund and what a CDFI does. And then I'd like to know a little bit more about that funded project. So can one of you please explain to me some of the Capital Good Fund's most recent success stories, not necessarily those aligned with, the rebrand or the retake on the Solar for All project, but just in general, any, one or two success stories you can share. And then if another one can tell me a little bit more about what a CDFI does. So either one, if you can go ahead and get us started, please.
Um, so I guess we can look at success from a couple of different angles when it comes to the organization. So as you mentioned, Patrice, we are a CDFI. So outside of solar leasing, our legacy business includes loans. So that's really what we were doing before the Solar for All or our Georgia Bright opportunity came up. So we provide impact loans, immigration loans, energy efficiency loans, as well as financial coaching and a credit builder loan program. So the kind of breadth and depth that we do as an organization, especially with such a small team, is actually pretty outstanding that we're able to accomplish all that we do and stay, afloat. And that in itself, especially with so many things changing with federal grants, like even the new changes with CDFI, as well as with Solar for All. One of the true successes this year is that Capital Good Fund is still here, and we're still figuring out how to serve the communities that we vow to serve. So that in itself is a success for the organization, and really it is a testament to our entire team, because people work at Capital Good Fund because of the mission of the organization. That's why people are here. You're not looking to buy a mega mansion, in Alpharetta or something. You really are here for the mission of the organization, and for a lot of us to serve communities that we came up in.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really the story of most of our staff,
Mm-hmm.
and they have stayed on. The staff that we have retained, they've stayed on, and they are continuing to do the good work, even in these troubling times.
Mm-hmm.
So that in itself has been a success. One of our other successes really is our clients.
Mm-hmm.
We are still able to serve the people who we've set out to serve.
Mm-hmm.
Our financial coaching program has really not done anything except expand and grow. As more people really want to understand their finances and figure out how they can save money, create budgets, build their credit so that they can start understanding what generational wealth looks like for them, and even just stabilizing their own finances. It is wonderful that we're able to offer our Impact and Impact Plus product, especially with, SNAP benefits, not happening right now. And so many people in the federal government terminated. It's not a grant. It is a loan that has to be repaid back, but it is a temporary solution for people who need it, especially now more than ever. Capital Good Fund has been able to pivot in times of crisis, times of change, times of uncertainty. And I know that's like a broad answer, but the success really is in what we offer and the team that we have that's working, tirelessly to make sure that we're serving our community.
Awesome. Awesome. And Alicia, if you can tell me what exactly is a CDFI? I mean, in your best definition of a CDFI.
Yeah, I have to explain this all the time whenever someone asks what I do.
Mm-hmm.
The way I would describe a CDFI is a financial institution that exists to serve communities that otherwise would not be served.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, we really have a focus on low-income families, families with low credit scores or minimal credit history, communities of color,
Mm-hmm.
and we do that across multiple states with the impact loans, the financial coaching, and with our solar leases.
Mm-hmm.
So just like to give some numbers, like for our solar program in Georgia, the average household income that we serve is under $70,000 in the mid 60s range. And we're serving folks with, average and below average credit scores who don't have those other options, or if they do have them, their interest rates are going to be much higher. So we're Treasury regulated, which means that someone's keeping an eye on us and making sure that consumer protections are front and center at all times, and that we are doing things the way that a financial institution should.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we have a lot of success stories. What I really love about Good Fund, as Aisha mentioned, the staff is there because they believe in the mission. What I love most is we have an all staff group chat essentially. And whenever we get like a really positive testimonial or Google review, like there are just emojis flying everywhere. Like, yes, we helped Mrs. Smith make her car payment.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, Margaret got to get her tooth fixed. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it seems small, but for those families who would otherwise be going to the local title max here in
Yeah.
Georgia, like they're not having to do that. And that can help them get through like these disruptions without taking on a financially ruinous decision.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad that you gave some really good examples, both of you, of not only your successes, but the impacts that you have on individuals. And obviously, when you take a broader look at communities as a whole. Now, for those of you who aren't aware, the current administration recently eliminated or attempted to eliminate, and I'll let you guys provide an update on that, all the staff in the Treasury Department's Community Development Financial Institution Fund office. So I don't know if you have a more recent update on that. That just happened, I believe, after the or was proposed to happen after the shutdown. So, do any of you have any updates on that? And how does that impact your organization, if it is indeed a shutdown office or the office? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, from my understanding, the office has not officially been shut down. I
Mm-hmm.
believe a lot of the staff has been dismissed
Mm-hmm.
versus furloughed. So, I mean, that's essentially, if you administer grants,
Mm-hmm.
who's doing the administrative work if the entire staff is gone? So essentially, there is no one to really, as Alicia mentioned, do that, keeping an eye on at the CDFI.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, there isn't a huge direct impact yet. And that's for a couple of reasons. So it was the CDFI fund.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't change our status as a U.S. Treasury, a CDFI.
Mm-hmm.
We are still a CDFI.
Mm-hmm.
Our target market goals were changed many months ago, as you know, with some of the other language that's been taken out of things around DEI and some other things. So that hasn't really impacted us in that way. We for Good Fund, we weren't currently in the process or had written any proposals for upcoming CDFI funds. So we didn't really have to scrap, anything that we were working on. We hadn't planned to receive CDFI funds. How it does impact us is we typically do receive funding from CDFI every year because, or CDFI fund because we are a CDFI. So
Mm-hmm.
for us, it really means not being able to have that CDFI money in our budget for 2026.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really the biggest impact is that, we work hard to keep our certification. The reporting that goes into it is, I wish our VP of development was on this call. She would tell you it's very tedious and time consuming
Mm-hmm.
what we have to report on. And of course, we do it every year, but it allows us to kind of have an estimated amount that we're going to receive every year from CDFI fund. And so for us this year, we're just not able to have that line item in our budget moving forward, which obviously does have impact, especially when as a nonprofit, we're, losing grant funding. It's really had us rely on outside sources to really fund the work that we're doing and outside philanthropic providers, outside capital providers and investors, which Alicia can probably talk to more. But it's really changed how we're thinking about how we fund the work that we do at Capital Good Fund for solar, as well as our lending products and our coaching department. So it's just made us have to rethink how we do things. And, I think we're learning that creativity has to happen every single day for us because we're not sure what's going to happen tomorrow, and that's just kind of where we are as an organization.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you pointed that out. So what Aisha just described is basically something that many nonprofits across the country are now facing, basically trying to be as creative as possible to replace any lost government funding, reestablishing relationships with private sources of funding, foundations, associations, corporations, and, just reconfiguring some of their programming, reconfiguring their staffing. Were there any staff losses? Were there any positions at the Capital Fund that were eliminated as a result of the loss of the Solar for All grant?
Yes. So we obviously, because this was a large grant specific to Georgia, we hired a lot of staff, primarily in the state of Georgia, and we had to lay off 20% of our workforce, which was obviously devastating because these were people that were really a part of the team and very excited about this solar program, and we're really looking forward to doing the good work that the grant was intended to do. So that was definitely a very hard decision for the organization. We really tried to retain as many people as possible. We spent countless, our C-suite team, we spent countless hours figuring out who and how we could keep as many people as we possibly could. So obviously it was, difficult, but we did end up having to lose about 22% of our workforce.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that story is, again, something we're hearing a lot of. We're seeing it in some of our clients. GrantsWorks ourselves, we had to lay off two staff because as our clients were losing grants or their grant portfolio was shrinking, of course, they had to make decisions themselves. So yeah, this is something that, kind of ripples through the entire country. One of the people on our team made a good point that, grants, especially federal grants and other government grants, are sort of the invisible infrastructure of the American economy. And not a lot of people are aware of that. Research grants, they fund billions of dollars of research projects at universities across the country. And so that's that's the professors, a small percentage of the professors' salaries. It's, grad students, tuition remission costs, stipends, obviously labs, lab technicians that are somehow working on these related projects. Those are just research projects. There are so many non-research projects, and the Capital Good Fund Solar for All project is another example, again, of that invisible infrastructure that is impacted when the funding is taken away, and taken away very quickly without much preparation and announced on X. So, uh, so I'm going to turn this over to you now, Alicia, because I really would love for you to let us know what was the project that was going to be funded. What was the project about? How many communities were going to benefit? Was it both solar, energy development and storage? I'll turn it over to you to please describe it for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of the thesis of our Solar for All program was we wanted it to be the community's vision. I had been in local government before I joined Good Fund, so was very plugged into community organizations, not only in Savannah, where I was based, but
Mhm.
across the state.
Mhm.
So I had really been like listening and talking to different groups for 3 or 4 years before Solar for All happened, and tried to write our application to serve as many use cases as possible. So our program was poised to serve about 16,000 low income and disadvantaged Georgians. And the term disadvantage really refers to the climate and economic justice screening tool, which looks at more than just income, looks at things like educational attainment, unemployment. So really getting into some areas that are just underinvested in Georgia.
Mhm.
But was going to serve 16,000 of those households across 4 programs. So one that Aisha mentioned was the no-cost solar plan, which was meant to be for
Mhm.
the lowest income households, a fully prepaid solar lease. And what's
Wow.
cool about it being a lease is that all the maintenance is included, so there's no surprise cost at any point. Like it's fully free to you.
Mm.
The second was a residential solar lease. So there was a monthly payment involved, but you're still guaranteed minimum savings of 20% a month.
Mhm.
So that was meant to serve, far more households than we could with the fully free program.
Mhm.
And then we also had some community scale options because even with all the innovation we were pursuing, it's not always possible to have solar on your home. Maybe you're in an apartment or you're a renter or you have great tree cover, as many parts of Atlanta and Savannah do.
Mhm.
So we arranged one to work with utilities on true community solar programs, like administered by them and offering on-bill savings. But we also, knowing that some of our utilities might not get with the program quickly enough, we also arranged for private community partners to host systems and transfer savings to eligible households. So those could be houses of worship, nonprofit organizations, even
Wow.
like a community rooted business.
Mhm.
Again, we really tried to put the all in solar for all, any housing type, any ownership condition, any home condition. We had 20 million of our budget set aside for like roof and electrical work.
Mm.
It was, I was trying to make it where any possible household, we could find something for them.
Mhm. Okay. And about how many community partners in total was a part of this? Not the contractors, because there are sometimes, obviously there are subcontractors, what are called grant funded contractors. Any subrecipients, were there going to be, community outreach folks engaged, and would they have been paid a stipend? Any other of those kind of variables involved?
Yeah, so we had 91 partners provide a letter of support just
Mm.
on the front end. And then we
Yeah.
had many more partners join throughout.
Mm-hmm.
We had 3 named coalition members, the cities of Savannah, Atlanta, and Decatur.
Mm-hmm.
We also had prepared in our budget to make about 10 community outreach subawards.
Mm-hmm.
We also had a program called the Solar Education and Outreach Partnership that was meant to be a way for organizations to get funding from Solar for All without the burdens of subaward compliance.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also just had, a large group of partners who were just supporting getting it out to their communities, like
Mm-hmm.
local governments, Habitat for Humanity chapters, just different groups that were active across the state. And then we also had about $3 million of workforce training funds set aside that
Mm-hmm.
were also going to go to nonprofits for both the technical training, but also we recognize how important those wraparound services are to
Mhm.
really put someone on the path to stable employment.
Wow, that was really a multivariable project. If that, yeah, that is I really, that is a fantastic project. I'm sorry. You really did think about everything, the workforce development, subawardees, 91 community partners, subcontractors, that were going to be, women-owned and veteran-owned subcontractors that were going to, I'm sure, somehow be a part of maybe the installation of storage. I'm not sure what component, but that
Building our reporting infrastructure, all of
yeah,
it.
yeah, it was a huge, so that sounds really, really, but what I like is that at the very top of the program, you said, well, that was that project. There is a version or variation of that project that is ongoing that I would love to learn about a little later on in the episode, because I do think it's always good on a hopeful note. I'm a glass half full woman. So the glass is always half full, in my opinion. So let's talk really quickly, though, about the genesis of the project. I understand that it was you, Alicia, again, that found out about the project. You found a partner and you were like, let's definitely apply for this. Tell me a little bit about the genesis of the project. Was there any resistance to moving forward? And then about how many hours and how many people participated in that application? Just to revisit that for a little bit.
Yeah, so Solar for All was preceded by a Georgia Bright pilot program. So
Hmm.
that program launched in September of 2023. And it just so happens that the Solar for All grant was due in October of 2023. So we hadn't learned much yet, to be completely honest. But being in a southern state where, politics does what it does, there
Hmm.
was a sentiment among community partners that a large grant may not have as much impact in the hands of,
Hmm.
a state entity as it would like in the hands of nonprofits and their government partners. And frankly, I just felt like this was a once in a generation opportunity that couldn't be passed up. So
Hmm.
there was definitely some nervousness. I mean, we knew we were going to have to compete. We knew it was going to be a huge undertaking, but we finally worked up the nerve to do it about 8 weeks before the application was due. So primarily me and then our CEO, Andy Posner, worked on this 40-page application. We had some really good community partners, our coalition members, getting letters of support for us and reading the application and providing feedback on it and iterating it with us. But it was
Hmm.
many 80 and 100-hour weeks working on this grant because in a way, I felt like we were really working for Georgia's clean energy future because I could
Hmm.
see how this grant could shift policy, how it could do market building, how it could just
Hmm.
transform lives, and by doing so, create legions of clean energy champions who would then vote in a certain way and perpetuate the policy we needed.
Hmm.
So there was like a kind of a grand chessboard in the head that made it worth it, but it like would not have happened without all the amazing partners providing like really detailed letters of support of like their dreams for the program and
Hmm.
giving that feedback and making sure that it was a compelling narrative that could win.
Yeah. So there's a lot I can follow up on that. There are a couple of things. Number one, it is I've been for months, I've been sitting on doing an episode about not just Solar for All, but the billions of dollars in, I mean, hundreds of billions of dollars in funding from the Inflation Reduction Act and funding from the bipartisan infrastructure law, which I believe Solar for All was a bill bipartisan infrastructure law derived funding source, or it may have been from the Inflation Reduction Act. And the billions of dollars of green energy, green manufacturing, environmental remediation, just an amazing amount of work. We worked with another organization that you guys are very familiar with. They won their first two federal grants as a result of our service as well. Um, and they had a workforce development program where they were going to be working with, bringing in folks that are typically underrepresented at the master electrician level so that they can become solar installers. And they were working with all these community colleges in that particular state. So there were a lot of really innovative, exciting projects that would have been funded had Solar for All and some of the other funding projects come about. So I do plan on sitting down and spending about 3 hours going through everything that happened with the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund and so many of the other funds that created programs that were then released as various notices of funding opportunity, which would, of course, resulted in amazing projects all around the country. It's a lot. I mean, it is a lot. Having worked with different organizations, I worked with a city government who that was, again, was looking to use some funding, workforce development funding in their particular department. And it was, again, there was a lot of funding, a lot of promise from all of that funding. And I'm kind of getting excited thinking about it because I can't wait to be able to tell that story, just kind of put it together in one piece. The second thing that comes to mind is the rise in utility bills that people are experiencing in Georgia and around the country from, I guess, let's call it standard energy sources, and how some communities at least would have had some kind of relief through this program had it been funded and allowed to continue. So any thoughts about that? Any one of you wanted to share any thoughts about that?
Kind of on along those lines, as a Georgian, it's been really interesting to see so many of my friends and extended friends and family really kind of understanding
Mm-hmm.
who controls the energy rates and how that all works, because that hasn't been a conversation that I've heard before.
Mm-hmm.
So really understanding, for instance, yesterday, we voted for 2 seats on the Public Service Commission,
Mm-hmm.
and we now those 2 seats have flipped to and have gone to Alicia Johnson and Peter Hubbard. So, the hope there is that people voted that way to help control some of their, the rising energy costs. I think, the people have seen, astronomical increases over the past like 3 years. And people are finally taking a look at their bill and going, wait, why does this bill keep going up
Mm-hmm.
over and over and over again? And so, a part of this program was really offering, because, as a consumer, there's not much you can do except pay that bill. Like, you have to keep your lights on, you have to use your stove, like you have to do these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a part of what the beauty of Solar for All and just in general our Bright program is really offering some needed relief to
Mm-hmm.
people who are impacted the most from rising energy costs.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that, truthfully, I know, it's kind of a secondary piece. What has felt like secondary to the conversation is, as we get further and further into what is now a climate crisis, all of these astronomical events are, not only going to take the lives of people, but are going to continue to increase general costs all the way around. And who does it hurt first? It hurts first marginalized communities, communities of color, low income communities, where they haven't built proper infrastructure for the increase of climate disasters,
Mm-hmm.
where communities are still living with, bridges that haven't been repaired for 30, 40, 50, 60 years. So if there is like, catastrophic rain, it's deteriorating and those bridges are falling apart and flooding entire neighborhoods. Like, these are real things that are happening. Hurricanes are category Cat 5 hurricanes are becoming way too commonplace.
Mm-hmm.
And some of these hurricanes are circling for days and days. I remember living in Houston when Hurricane Harvey hit, and it was a hurricane that literally stayed over land for days. And we were in 500, 800 year, I can't think of the term, I think it's called flood zones, where basically a once in 500 years, or you're safe for 500, 800 years, where these communities were completely destroyed, And some communities were built up very quickly again and secured from all sides, dams secured and made sure this wouldn't happen again, while these marginalized communities, Black communities, low income communities were left to fend for themselves. Were left to, and continue to be left to fend for themselves. We've seen it with Hurricane Helene here in Georgia. I mean, there's so many examples. And this was really Capital Good Fund's opportunity to put at least a tiny little cork in this, global problem, to at least impact the people that we could. and the communities that are hurt the most, really giving them an opportunity to stop some of the bleeding. I mean, if we can't do it on a global scale, this really was a program to like this was kind of a pilot program to show, in my opinion, the rest of the country, the rest of the world, that it can be done. We don't
Absolutely.
have to give in to these climate disasters because, just complaining about, oh, well, our grandfathers didn't do it and they're the reason why, industrialization, all these things.
Hmm.
Okay, but let's find a solution. This is a real solution. This is a real way we can follow suit with the way other countries are doing it and really impact the entire world. And this was the example of how we can do that with just working together, using our tax dollars in a meaningful way to really serve others and serve ourselves. So
Absolutely.
I know I just went down a rabbit hole. I don't even remember what the original question was, but
That's okay.
um,
No, you answered the question. That was absolute, and I appreciate you really again connecting the dots. The important thing is that with everything that you share, and hopefully with some of the things that I share in between, is that we're connecting the dots for folks because again, it's an invisible infrastructure, and we're trying to make it more visible. So I appreciate that. And so. Alicia, we have about three more questions. I do want to ask you, what are the plans to continue the project? How's it been reconfigured? Um, I'd love for you to start on that. I do want to quickly pick up though on what Aisha was saying. So I am actually from one of those countries that just experienced a huge hurricane. I'm from Jamaica. I've shared this on LinkedIn. It's out there. I'm an immigrant, proud immigrant, and so those small island nation states we're getting it right. We're getting whipped, so to speak, by climate change. We expected it. We've been advocating for, global decision making and commitments. And but again, we're feeling it, just like everyone else. As you mentioned in Houston, you guys also experienced it. Hurricanes that sit over the city for days on end, even though it's over a city and not a water body. So that's very interesting. But Alicia, please, it's Aisha and Alicia. Bear with me, guys. Alicia, if you can tell me the plans to continue the project with other funding sources, what does that project look like now?
Yeah, so unfortunately, Solar for All was not the only hit that the solar industry took this year. There
Hmm.
was also the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which has radically transformed the solar tax credit landscape.
Hmm.
So, like to make that like a very quick summary, the 25D residential credit that can be claimed directly by homeowners
Hmm.
expires at the end of this year.
Mm.
And then the commercial tax credit that Good Fund uses to serve homeowners and that commercial entities can take for themselves, that one now expires in 2027 instead of it had previously been in the mid 2030s.
Mm.
And there's also new foreign entity of concern requirements that just add some layers of compliance to the materials that you can use and still access the tax credit.
Mm.
So, against that backdrop, we have decided to pursue something called safe harbor. So, with those changing tax credits, if you pursue one of two pathways, one of two tests, either a 5% expenditure test or a physical work test, you can commence construction for tax purposes this year and still claim tax credits under the existing rules. So, Capital Good Fund is working hard to raise capital and build a project pipeline to safe harbor many millions of dollars worth of projects under 2025 rules so we don't have to deal with the complexity of the foreign entity of concern restrictions. So we're doing that not only in Georgia, where we had solar for all, but in our other solar state of Pennsylvania, as well as for other states that had solar for all and are trying to move on from it. We're partnering with the Nevada Clean Energy Fund, for instance, and
Yeah.
really kind of bonded over the shared trauma of solar
Yeah.
for all.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I'm so glad that you brought up Nevada. So I remember in March reading an article that they were going to be able to keep their Solar for All funding and some other funding that apparently their representatives had worked really hard for them to be able to keep. I have to tell you though, as a person that reads federal grant, just policy and I knew the axe was coming. I knew it was coming. It's unfortunate. But I was thinking, well, maybe this will be, awarded or, states will be able to keep them, or certain entities will be able to keep their awards based on the advocacy of their own representatives. And I think that was happening a little bit, because I do remember reading that Nevada was able to retain some of their funding in March. I haven't looked it up but I'm sure that that's gone as well. Another quick story to share. We'd actually been considered for a project, or submitted for consideration for a project in the U.S. Virgin Islands. So, of course, their project was canceled as well, and they were one of the awardees. So, I'd love to ask you, though, Alicia, and as we're approaching the last several minutes of our time together, what are your thoughts about it, or your feelings about it? I mean, you've been telling me some facts about how you guys are going to be reconfiguring and making some changes. What are your thoughts about the contraction of solar energy in the U.S.?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of different feelings about it. Like on one hand, there's definitely the disappointment that solar has been politicized
Mhm.
because, I mean, this is a resource that once you install it, you don't have the variable cost like you do with fossil fuels.
Mhm.
That's actually been part of the story of the rising rates in Georgia has been, the fossil fuel volatility that came in the wake of the Ukraine conflict.
Mhm.
So that's one thing is, sadness at where our country has landed in terms of just partisan divides. Because I'll let you know, the 828 households that signed up for Solar for All, I am quite sure probably at least 40% of them voted for the president and thought he was advancing their interests.
Mhm.
So that's one piece. I
Mhm.
think a second piece is there's definitely been like some negativity in
Mhm.
the part of the investment community and the philanthropic community, like, oh, solar's on the down, so we're going to go to something else.
Mhm.
So it's definitely been an uphill climb to raise resources to continue to move in this direction. But what I'm trying to relay to those who are having their doubts is that even if the ITC, the investment tax credit, goes away,
Mhm.
there is still very much a path for solar in this country. Like
Mhm.
with Solar for All, we were working with Georgia Power to build a virtual power plant program that's going to take residential solar and batteries and make them into an orchestrated grid resource that can
Mhm.
reduce the need for expensive power plants and stabilize costs, reduce blackouts. Like that's a utility, an investor-owned utility that sees value in rooftop solar and storage, and they are not the only one.
Mhm.
So the models may look different, but the value remains. As
Mhm.
we're seeing more of these climate disasters and as we're seeing just rising energy rates, solar is going to remain very important. So it's just
Absolutely.
making sure that we all work together to build that succession plan because I mean everything has to have its time where it weans off of subsidies, except fossil fuels apparently.
Mhm.
Um, but just making sure that we're all moving in the same direction on that, and also trying to with that politicization, if people have concerns,
Mhm.
listening to those with empathy and really responding to them so that we can start to slowly but surely make this a bipartisan issue again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Last two questions. So Aisha, what is the Capital Good Fund's position on federal grants?
Um, our position on federal grants is that we still love them.
Hmm.
We would like to have some.
Hmm.
We're still a CDFI. We are still a nonprofit.
Hmm.
So we rely on philanthropy. We rely on federal grants. That has been what has built the organization throughout the entire life of the organization. So we would love to take advantage of federal grants that align with the mission of the organization, obviously. So
Hmm.
moving forward, we're really focused on making sure that any type of capital, any grants, any funding that comes through the door for Capital Good Fund. Obviously, right now we're having to really be mindful of every single dollar that comes in, and we're using every dollar strategically
Hmm.
to build out the pivot plan of the organization. So we're not picky. So we will definitely take it all because our mission hasn't changed.
Yeah,
No matter who is in office at what level, the mission of the organization hasn't changed, and we're here
absolutely.
to serve the same communities. We're having to get more creative how we serve them, but that hasn't changed for us. And
Absolutely.
those values still hold true for the organization and every person that works for Capital Good Fund, and especially our CEO.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'll leave it right there. Aisha Bussey, I want to make sure I'm saying that last name correctly. And of course, Alicia Brown, both of the Capital Good Fund. Thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy day to tell us the story of, the organization's loss of its Solar for All fund, Solar for All grant, and, just share the experience and internally, but also help us understand the impact, right? The community impact, the impact within the state of Georgia, and how, solar energy generation and storage and just all the innovations around that are slowing down because of some of these decisions, and helping us understand again some of the broader implications of some of the policy decisions that are coming down from the federal level. So again, thank you so much for your time. If you want to learn, listeners, a little bit more about the Capital Good Fund, please go to capitalgoodfund.org. And again, I'd like to thank my guests, Aisha and Alicia. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you, audience, for joining me on the Federal Grants Explained podcast.